Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, everybody out there in podcast land. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the Bunny Rabbit's Hole. And I, of course, am Jason.
And I, of course, am Craig.
All right. So here at the Bunny Rabbit's Hole, if you haven't been here before, if this is your first time, or if you just need a refresher, what we do here is we take a topic each and every week. We thoroughly research that topic, but that's Craig's part. And then we talk about that topic until something inspires us to talk about something else. We go down that hole until we reach the end or until Craig decides that enough is enough. We're going to talk about the topic at hand and get it straight back on the straight and narrow.
Yes, and as Jason said, we research the topic. We research both sides, not just what fits our narrative. But we also include our opinions because this is entertainment. And if you're easily offended, now is the time when you turn it off, go somewhere else. And we will continue on and say bye-bye.
And bye-bye. Bye-bye. This is the time to turn it off, to delete us, to unsubscribe, to whatever if you were easily offended by anything that we say here today, because we do have opinions and we are still Americans and we do have rights to have opinions. Right. You have rights to not like our opinions. And I have rights to not like you're not liking my opinion. But you know, none of that matters because today we are talking about what, Craig?
Today we are talking about evolution. Dun, dun, dun.
Evolution. Okay. I'm just going to jump right in with this one because what is evolution? All right. So evolution was an epic $80 million blockbuster that came out in 2001. It was like one of the first real big CGI movies. It starred David Duchovny. It had Julianne Moore. It had, and my favorite, Orlando. Make 7-Up yours, Jones from Mad TV. You remember those commercials?
Oh, yeah.
It also had Stifler, Sean William Scott. It was directed by Ivan Reitman. It was an $80 million budget. It made we're not talking about that movie, are we?
No, I think we're talking about the first ever women's pay-per-view for the WWE. That Evolution?
That sounds better, but no.
Oh. So maybe Charles Darwin?
That's the one.
Okay.
That's the one. Yes, we're going to talk about, and a lot of people dispute whether or not we descended from apes. Okay. I don't give a fuck.
Right.
So,
here, I'll start us out because Jason's got more research than I do, so I'll just throw mine in. I'll give you basically the definition of evolution. It's a change in the heritable characteristics of biological populations over successive generations. These characteristics are the expression of genes that are passed on from parent to offspring during reproduction.
right.
And it really can stretch on and on and on and on.
Exactly. So I would just want to get out because like we said, we view both sides. And I want to start with the side of religion stating that Gregor Mendel was a crackpot. There's no way that we descended from apes. Okay. So probably true. Let's think about in this terms. We can take genetics and DNA and dissect it all the way up, manufacture, engineer. You can even pick your children's eye color now. So they can go in and they can gene sequence and do whatever and make a perfect child. You're telling me that we can't figure out the link from this ape to humans, this missing link, that we can do all that now, but we can't figure out between the two. Now, my theory is this is my personal theory, is the fact that figuring that out, that link out, if there was in fact the answer to that would be like saying that aliens do exist, humans couldn't handle it. People across the Bible Belt would just freak out, start burning their Bibles, tearing their churches down, and do whatever. So we don't answer that question because of the ramifications, because people are stupid. And we just, I'm not calling everybody who's religious stupid. I'm just saying that as a society, if
Let's say close-minded.
Yeah. And as a society, if we knew for a fact that aliens have visited here, we probably would just lose our shit. So for the same reason that we won't answer, whether the government and other people won't answer the fact that whether or not aliens are actually landed here and actually made contact with us, we won't answer that question, and we won't answer the link between the two. For the same.
Well, I'm gonna interject, because in my research I found that from 6 through 7 million years ago in Africa, they have discovered what they believe to be the missing link.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hominin, but it's kind of like, because I was misinformed, because I thought, Neanderthals were part of, the evolution, but Neanderthals existed at the same time as human beings did.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. But they found these remains that were like 6 to 7 million years old in Africa that really kind of show that those genes that kind of evolved from the ape. But I mean, when you really get down to it, every humanoid figure, whether it be ape, chimpanzee, humans, in their embryos have gill slits.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also believed, up until like 6 months old, you have gill slits inside the womb. The embryo does, but we never breathe through them. So there's a theory that we evolved from fish.
Yeah, which even fucks that whole ape thing up even more. Now, I think the reason that the religious side about evolution say it's nixed is because the embarrassment of thinking that they're on the same level as an ape.
Right.
And that's the part that they can't get past. But I want to throw this part out there. And now I'm not destroying them or trying to offend them. What I'm saying is there is also a psychological theory of that when you look upon a criminal, you think of them as a lower caste or a lower life form, or not quite human, or less evolved.
Right.
This is something that you can see. There's proof of this type of stuff in the Bible. There's proof of this type of stuff in all society, that we look at different humans as lesser.
Mm-hmm.
And lesser would mean less evolved, is really
Right.
what that boils down to. So, in fact, you actually see and witness evolution around you all the time.
Right.
Whether
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's just the point that we are monkeys is the point that God didn't create us in his image. In his image is not a gorilla.
How do we know?
The part that they get offended. So now that we got that out of the way.
Well, I want to touch on that real quick.
Okay.
Because it's not just, I totally agree with you that it's the whole looking down thing, because we look down on our pets, we look down on everything else as being below us.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also the same problem that you have with today's politics. It's pride. Nobody wants to admit that they're wrong.
Yeah. You're right. And now a lot of my Christian friends have told me throughout the years, and I've heard this multiple times, that Darwin actually said on his deathbed that he was wrong. That evolution was bullshit, blah, blah, blah. He may have been wrong, and I'll go into that later, but I found no proof that he actually did a deathbed confession. So we're out from this point forward. The rest of this podcast is going to go with the idea that he did not say that.
Right. Well, it's just like everything else. If you don't have facts to back it up, there are scientific facts that help prove evolution. Not just that, everything evolves. Look at technology. Technology has evolved.
Right.
We as human beings have evolved from what we were 500 years ago. Hell,
right.
From what we were 50 years ago. And it's its thinking and everything else. Everything evolved. Go ahead.
Right. Recently, the World Wide Web just turned 30 years old, which, if you don't know, the internet is actually older. The internet and the World Wide Web are actually two different things. The internet is the internet, and then the World Wide Web is an informational structure that works within the internet, much like email works within the internet. So there's now, when Tim Berners-Lee created that over 30 years ago, he's seen his baby develop, evolve, if you will, into what it is today. So everything evolves. And we'll go into a lot more examples of things that have evolved throughout time, and we'll show you proof that evolution is real. It's just people fight evolution because, like you said, the pride factor that we are monkeys.
Right. And I mean, all life on Earth is connected and related to each other in one way or shape or form. I mean, you look at it, you can look at it as the food chain. You can look at it as, assistance, like you have service animals and stuff like that. I mean, everything. I mean, like bees are an endangered species right now. If bees get wiped out, it's going to deplete our food source.
Exactly.
People are just too ignorant to see that. I mean, not people. A lot of people are, because they just don't want to think about it. That cognitive dissonance.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that term up, because that is one of the phrases that is thrown out there in the psychological aspect when you're dealing with criminals and sociopaths, because people look at them as lesser, but in the fact that like a serial killer looks at their prey as de-evolved, as lesser beings. So we look down upon people all the time. So those are actually the psychological ways of revealing evolutionary traits. Whether they're real or not, it still brings out the idea that beings change over time. And like you stated before, evolution is any change of heritable traits within a population over generations.
Yeah, I mean, without evolution, we'd still be primitives. We wouldn't even have stone tools, because that's part of evolution.
Exactly. And the stone tools is another good example. They've done this multiple times, where they'll take a population of some kind of ape, a monkey, gorilla, whatever. They'll teach one of them how to use a tool. Then they stand back, and within a day or two, the entire colony is using that tool. Like they show them how to use a rock to crack open a nut. And then within days, something that they had, they didn't have the knowledge to do before, now they all do. So they've evolved into tool using.
Right. It's the 100 monkeys thing that we talked about before in previous podcasts. I mean, I can go over it again for those that might not have heard it.
Hey, we'll do it real quick.
Basically, if there's an island, say there's 1,000 monkeys on this island, the only ones that live on this island, the only food source on this island is coconuts, but they don't know how to open the coconuts. And scientists are observing this island, so they go and they pull 100 monkeys off the island. They teach each of those monkeys how to open coconuts. They put those 100 monkeys back on the island, and basically one other monkey sees them opening coconuts to eat, and it just spreads instantly, and all 1,000 of them know how to open coconuts.
Yeah. Exactly. So you can do personal evolution just through knowledge.
Right.
Right. But was Darwin incorrect? Now, there's a book that came out a little while ago. I'm trying to, what the fuck was the name of it? It's in my notes here. Oh, it's called The Tangled Tree. Is the name of the book. And where the fuck's this dude's name? Where's my notes? Anyway, it's David. I'm not gonna slaughter his name. It's Quammen, Quimmen.
Okay.
Anyway, he's a National Geographic contributing writer, and he has this book that basically states, I'm going to sum it up real quick, and I'm going to sum it up and dumb it down real quick. What he basically states was Darwin wasn't incorrect. He just didn't have all the information.
Right.
So his theories and everything are based upon the knowledge that he had of time, and he watched things like at the Galapagos Islands where we weren't there. He went, in his book, The Beagle, he talks about how things change over time. But what this guy was saying was, now I'll just read his quote. It's like, we humans probably came from creatures as recently as 40 years ago were unknown to exist.
Right.
So he threw out, he being Darwin, throws out the fact that we're closely associated with apes, so therefore we probably came from them. And what this guy is saying is maybe it goes back farther than that.
Right.
Maybe like you were saying that we could have evolved from fish, and then this fish put out, started walking on land, started growing hair, then it had babies, and then those babies had babies, and then these babies went on to be gorillas, these babies went on to be orangutans, these babies went on to be humans.
Right. Well, and there's like in recent studies and stuff like that, they have actually found that whales evolved from a creature that lived on land mainly.
Mm.
But that creature no longer exists. It evolved into whales because that creature could swim and would go in the water. It wasn't very mobile on land. It was more mobile in the water. It was kind of like, I want to say almost amphibious, but it was mammal.
Mm-hmm.
And, it would go into the water, and then it had legs that, didn't work well on land, but worked good for pushing water to swim.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually that evolved into the whale.
Kind of like an otter that just got big.
Right. And to touch on like what you're saying about Darwin is let's look at if Darwin was alive today with the technology we have today, how easy it would be for him to prove his theories.
Mm.
He was going by observation. He didn't, and maybe dissection, whereas now we have all this technology with x-rays and shit like that where you can see all this shit.
Now we can swab the cheek of an otter and find out whether or not they're related to the whale through DNA.
Right. And to touch on the Galapagos Island thing, there's a species of finch that live on that island,
mm-hmm.
that their beaks evolved because it helped them eat things and get to things differently. So they had like a beak that was, basically pointed like most birds, but then it ended up curving down.
Mm.
So their beaks evolved for better survival. You look at it like a polar bear. It's white. It lives in snow.
Right.
Creatures evolve to their habitat.
It'd be dumb for a polar bear to be brown.
Right. You look at, people that live in Michigan, during the winter, we put on weight.
Yeah.
It helps them survive.
The winter layer.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm also going to bring up, because we did a podcast a little while ago called the Akashic Records.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's been released yet, but in that we talk about people having the same idea at the same time. Well, at the same time as Darwin came up with his theory, there was a British biologist, Alfred Russel Wallace, that came up with a theory of evolution by natural selection. There was another French guy, Jean-Baptiste Lemot, came up with the idea that organisms can pass on its traits to its offspring. They both came up with the idea at the same time as Darwin. And as you point out with Darwin, there were some flaws in his theory. Same with them. They had flaws in their theory as well.
I wouldn't necessarily say they're flaws, because at the time they was spot on. Look how many things how much science has changed over time. It's like when growing up, drink milk, it'll make you strong. Drink milk, it'll make you strong. Now it's like, you shouldn't drink milk after being a child. Science learns shit and you figure this stuff out, that it's not necessarily that they were wrong for what they had. They were beyond their years in the discoveries that they came up with. It's just that the technology has made the science easier to do it. I mean, like we were talking about before, now you can take a cotton swab of the inside cheek of a bear and figure out its entire, ancestry. We can do the same with us with like 23andMe and Ancestry.com. We spit in a tube, send it to them. We can find out our entire past.
Right.
Imagine what they could have done had they had that type of stuff.
Oh, yeah. It would be amazing.
Now,
and I want to kind of touch on, kind of go back to what we started on. I mean, let's look at things like the flu virus. Okay.
Actually, I'm glad you did that, because that's exactly what I was going to transition into.
Yeah. So, our body builds up these immunities, and people go get a flu shot. So the flu virus mutated, evolved to circumvent that flu shot, so it can still attack your system and all that's in your immune system, and you come down with the flu. Everything evolved. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if the vaccines we got as kids, those diseases figured out a way to evolve and come back.
Well, in my area right now, there's a huge thing on measles right now. Measles is coming back for some reason, and there's signs up at all the hospitals and a lot of public places. Please make sure that you had your measles vaccine before you enter.
Wow.
Type of stuff. Yeah, and measles. Who the fuck thinks about measles?
Right, because I mean, we hadn't thought about that since we were kids. Because like when we were kids, if one of us got chicken pox, our parents would put us together.
Yeah, the chicken pox parties.
Yeah. Because
as soon as you got it once, you never got it again.
Right.
And then you got to get your shingles vaccination later in life. But so if evolution was complete and total bullshit, then you wouldn't have to they wouldn't offer a flu vaccine every year.
Right.
Because you get one and you should be done, just like with the measles, just like with now they have they have the chickenpox virus. We almost got rid of smallpox because of vaccinations. So if the flu and the cold virus didn't change or evolve, then it was just a simple shot and it'd be done. But there is something else called a horizontal gene transfer.
Okay.
Now, this is kind of an interesting thing where instead of completely changing and moving on to a new species, you actually can transfer your genes to a different species who's right next to you.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of that. Yeah, keep talking. I'll find it.
Okay. So one of the examples of this is how this usually works is when you start taking antibiotics for a specific a virus, and then the antibiotic now is ineffective because the virus has become immune to it. So one of the big things for this is like the Staphylococcus virus did this thing where it started getting resistant to bacteria, and then, or not bacteria, but to antibiotics. And what it did was it kind of like, I won't say butted off, but it kind of transferred its genes over to a completely different form of bacteria, say E. coli. That it's not just in bacteria, but this actually happens in different parasites too, where a parasite can transfer its genes to another parasite and making that a super parasite.
Right. Now, yeah, I during my research, I found something called genetic drift, which kind of goes along with what you're saying, and that's the frequency of certain genes can also change at random, but it's genes transferred from one population to another when organisms migrate or immigrate, a process of gene flow. So okay. It's also kind of termed as genetic drift. So, when, you look at it, and like when we came over to, America, we basically wiped out half the Indian population with our diseases.
Right.
And then the ones that survived became immune to it, basically, through process of evolution.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, when it comes down to it, I found there's different types of evolution. There's convergent evolution, coevolution, and adaptive radiation. And what I was talking about with the finches on the Galapagos Island is an example of adaptive radiation. That's when a species splits into a number of new forms when a change in the environment makes new resources available or creates new environmental challenges. So those finches, their beaks evolved because there's different kinds of food that were available on different islands. So it made it easier for them to eat. Convergent evolution is when the same adaptation evolved independently under similar selection pressures. For example, flying insects, birds, and bats have all evolved the ability to fly, but independently of each other. And then there's coevolution, when two species or groups of species have all evolved alongside each other, where one adapts to changes in the other. For example, flowering plants and pollinating insects such as bees.
Exactly. Yes. The one of those that I like the most, though, is the adaptive radiation.
Yeah.
Because the first thing that comes to my mind is, Bruce Banner becoming the Hulk.
Yeah.
Gamma radiation. Now he evolved into the Hulk. Now, obviously that's not right, but I think of adaptive radiation is kind of where we see this in a lot of our own lives, where you have to change to fit the situation.
Right.
Like I say I move back to Michigan, and let's say I move back in October. I better fucking change to get a fucking heavy coat and some mittens and some gloves. Now that's not a personal. That's my body's not changing, but by the end of that winter, I better fucking change. Otherwise, I'm not going to survive it.
Well, your body does change because your blood thickens to help create the warmth. You look at like people who have heart conditions and stuff like that. They move to southern, warmer climates to help thin their blood out.
Yeah.
And it's people that live in the north, like especially the northern Midwest, like where I live. We have thicker blood because of our bodies slowed down in the winter because of how cold it is. And it's a way to keep us warm.
It's a way to say, I only look like this because it's wintertime.
Right.
But you look like that in July too.
But going back to like things that evolved. Look at, to touch on, we change with what's going on around us. Look at the English language. We don't still talk like Shakespeare did. Most of us can't even. Most people today read Shakespeare and are completely lost. Exactly,
because there's a lot of words. Read the Constitution.
Yeah,
we don't talk like that anymore.
No, and language has evolved from that to how you and I speak, or how go into ebonics, or go into like how the kids slang today, or whatever you want to call it.
And now it's just evolved into a bunch of emojis.
Yeah. And abbreviated words that don't mean anything. If you have to type the letter U instead of YOU, you're just fucking lazy.
it autofills it. Your phone will autofill you. All you got to do is push Y and a button. You're still, you compromise, okay? Compromise. It's like you still have to hit the capital U, the up arrow U to be U, or you hit Y and then hit the word U. It's the same amount of keystrokes, but you look better doing the other one.
Yeah, you sound less stupid.
Exactly. There's another thing called transposon.
Okay.
Which is kind of like adaptive I think this one kind of falls more in the adaptive or coevolution, because you're living and working together. It is a stretch of DNA that transposes from one part of the genome within a creature to another. So this would be like the beak thing, where if I had a hook on the end of my bill, I could dig down in those little crevices and pull those little things out. So your child's nose will start getting a little bit more pointy. Then their child's nose will start defining the hook. Now, in birds, not all birds, but like finches and stuff like that, they don't have the lifespan that, say, a parrot. So these evolutionary changes can happen in a relatively short time.
Right. Now, that's also an example of microevolution or natural selection.
Yeah.
And that's where changes of species in small ways causing a population to change color or size over the course of several generations. Basically, like you said, okay, our beak, we had to, evolve our beaks to get to that food. And then when our offspring are born, they're already born with that beak curved.
Yeah.
There's also macroevolution that can create new species, such as dinosaurs evolved into birds, amphibious mammals, whales, apes, and humans.
Now, one of the other things about our names given to transposon is, and I may be saying that wrong, that has been given the name of space invaders. It's a long stretch of DNA that invades a lot of different organisms. It seems to be able to pass, for instance, from a reptile to an insect to a possum into a rat by the way of something called the kissing bug. An insect that, when sucking blood, sucks some of that transposon, and the transposon then moves from one species to another and becomes part of that heritable genome in the new species.
Kind of like mono?
Yeah. Yeah. But mono that changes your future.
Yeah, your DNA, everything.
Yeah. So, this isn't scientific, but this would be an example of that. Would be, say, a bug, a mosquito or something like that, sucks the blood out of a bear, and say it sucks it out of a polar bear. Then it goes and lands on a wolf. Then it goes and lands on a fox. But now we have a white bear that the blood's now on a white wolf, a brown wolf, and a red fox. Eventually, the wolf will start having white babies, and then the fox will start having white babies. Now we have an Arctic wolf and a snow fox. So they're all white now.
Right.
Now that's not really how any of that happens. I'm just throwing out what the fuck I'm talking about.
Right. So I'm gonna go back to natural selection, because when a lot of people think about evolution, they hear the words natural selection, and
Yeah.
I honestly didn't know what this meant until I looked it up. It's a process whereby organisms better adapted to their environment tend to survive and produce more offspring. The theory of its actions was first fully expanded by Charles Darwin and is now believed to be the main process that brings about evolution. Now, there's also stuff that goes on to say, if everything, our bodies mutate or evolve, and if the mutation proves beneficial, it'll become more prevalent in the next generation and spread through the population. So in those mutations are the physical and behavioral changes that make natural selection possible to happen at the level of DNA and genes. Think of comic books. We mentioned the Hulk. Now let's go to the X-Men.
The mutants.
And the cool thing about that is, at the time the X-Men came out, it was like late 60s, 70s. I can't remember exactly when. But Stan Lee it was part of the civil rights movement for him, was to take these characters that were different and, treat them as, African Americans were being treated at the time.
Yeah.
And show that, okay, you have a man in a wheelchair who is the most powerful mutant in the world. So even a handicapped person can be a superhero.
Yeah.
But they were, if Magneto basically said they evolved from humans. I can't remember what they were Homo superior, while we were Homo sapien or whatever.
Yeah.
So evolution's been used in so many things, and it goes on to show just if there wasn't evolution, again, we would be back to being primitives, eating berries, because we wouldn't know how to make tools, to kill things, to cook things, to eat things. We would have died out centuries ago.
Exactly. So I think what we're both trying to really say with all this is it's too simplistic to say that you got to whitewash the theory of evolution just because of the little notion that we evolved from apes. And that's the part that most people can't get past, because the Bible said God created us in his image, and his image wasn't a gorilla. So you have to take that little section out and set it up on the shelf, and then close that shelf, and then lock it, and then burn it, and then change your whole opinion, because things evolve around us every fucking day.
Right. And to kind of go on with that argument, or that not argument, but your theory there is, for somebody like me that doesn't believe in their God, and they say, well, why don't? And if I say, well, I can't see him, you don't. Well, can you see the air? No. Well, how do you know your God wasn't a gorilla? How do you know? I mean, you.
That's a good point. That's actually a good point, because, I mean, let's face it. If you haven't seen him, how many times? Okay, here we go. How many times have you listened to a radio station, a podcast, or something, or even you hear a comic in the background, or hear a joke or something that by a comic, and then you see the person and their face does not match the voice?
Oh yeah, all the time.
So could it be that the word and the voice of God doesn't match the face?
Could be.
So, and I'm not saying that God, Yahweh, Muhammad, Buddha, Satan, whoever your deity is, or Quetzalcoatl, I'm not saying that they're a podcaster or a radio DJ, but what I am saying is just be open.
Yeah.
So where does evolution evolve?
Oh, that's interesting. I want to know. Tell me.
Okay, so before I do that, I want to go back and explain a little bit something. So back in the 1800s, there was a scientist / monk named Gregor Mendel. Now, anybody who had a high school biology class knows Gregor Mendel, because these are the fucking little chart things you did where you put the capital Y, the little y, capital Y, little y, and then you did the whole thing. And then by the time you're done, you had a couple of two double Ys, two little Ys, and then two mutants in between. That was called genetics. He did all this with pea pods. You did it writing down on a piece of paper with Y's and X's and whatever other numbers you wanted to use. So he learned that if I took this type and cross-pollinated it with this type, we could get this type of plant. So he was actually working with mutation of pea plants just to see what the fuck would go on. So he was a man of God, fucking with nature and creating his own mutant breeds. He was like a Monsanto before Monsanto, genetically modifying pea pods, but right. Not to the evil extent that there was. So what he was doing was basically documenting and proving that mutations were possible and what happens when you do it. At the same time, even going back farther, we're doing the same shit with dogs. It's like, well, let's get that dog to fuck this dog, and maybe we'll get a little dog.
Right.
That little dog and this big dog, and see what the fuck happens. We're doing the same shit with dogs because, we somehow domesticated a wolf and then bred them into Frank the Pug. God
Right.
knows why, but we did.
Right.
Because they just wanted to see what the fuck would happen. So at the same time that they were doing that with dogs, we were seeing the results with these new breeds. And I'm sorry, if you went to a puppy mill and you got yourself a purebred dog for $2,500, your dog is not a purebred, it's still a fucking mutt. Okay, it's a genetically modified mutant, which will probably die faster than the one from the pound that was just, a product of hasty dog sex. Okay, so that
whole new meaning to doggy style there,
exactly. So,
or the original meaning. Sorry.
So where I'm going with all this is so after I'm trying to get my train of thought again. So we've seen what we could do mutating dogs. We've seen what we do mutating there. That brings us to, and we've talked about this period of time multiple times, but the atrocious shit that the Nazis were doing to the Jews in concentration camps, specifically Mengele, Joseph Mengele. He was experimenting with these people, and he was just a fucking evil motherfucker, piece of shit. Fuck him. But he was trying to breed different. He was trying to create different species amongst the Jews, and then he was just creating these abominations by trying to inseminate women with like bull semen and just doing some crazy fucked up shit with these people. Now, unfortunately, through his research, we learned that you can't do that shit. But at the same time, let's go back to the Akashic record thing with two people doing the same thing at the same time. There were Russian scientists that were trying to create a race of supermen, but they weren't doing like the Nazi supermen. They were trying to cross-pollinate, if you will, use a Mendel term, like he was doing with they're doing with the dogs. They were trying to create like gorilla supermen, like a man with the strength of a gorilla, but with the mind of a gorilla, also, but the loyalty of a man, all mixed into this super race to put them on the battlefield, and they would just go and fight and do whatever, but it didn't work.
Well, there's no way to control something. I mean, loyalty isn't a gene. It's a way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take the thinking process out,
it's a way of programming.
Yeah.
It's a way of programming. Now, the lesson that they learned there was, well, first of all, this creature, they didn't live.
Right.
I mean, they're inseminating women with fertilized human eggs with gorilla semen, and tried to it didn't work. So we've tried this shit in the past with humans, like we're trying with dogs, and it didn't work. But that brings us to the next evolution, which back in the 80s there was a jewel thief, and this was in Time magazine. I don't have the thing. There was a jewel thief who was caught, who had surgically implanted a vacuum tube in his arm that went up to a small pouch in his shoulder, powered by a battery pack on his back. And when he was looking at diamonds, he just vacuumed them up with his hand without anybody even noticing. Now, this was in the 80s. This guy did this. And for those, and I'm pretty sure our audience would understand, this is what we call cyberpunk. Cybernetic enhancements to your body. Now, this guy did it for evil because he was trying to steal jewels. But if we were doing this shit in the 80s, now we've got prosthetic arms that actually work with your mind, that can reach, an arm can reach and grab and pick up stuff and write letters and shit like that. We've got some crazy enhancements that are doing that. That is where I think evolution is evolving, is we will start becoming more and more cybernetically enhanced. If you lose an eye, you can get a cybernetic eye.
Right. I mean, they've also done that with like heart transplants too, haven't they? Where they put like a mechanical heart in.
Yeah, they did that in the 80s. Of course, unfortunately, the artificial heart thing, you had to carry around a briefcase that had batteries in it.
Right. And then a lot of bodies rejected them too.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something that, you know, but they've also put like animal hearts into people.
Yes. We use a lot of cadavers and cow tendons and stuff like that in people's. A lot of athletes end up with, you know, cow tendons in their knees when they go bad.
Right. Yeah. And
medically, like, we're evolving into a new species.
Right. Yeah, and like you go back to what you said earlier about how we can pick our kids' eye color and stuff. If we can do stuff like that, there's no reason why we can't genetically modify our offspring to be immune to cancer, immune to all these other diseases and stuff like that. But you can't make money when people are immune to those things.
Exactly. And one of the things too is that would be kind of, they're creating so somebody's developing a patent on nanobots that can target cancer cells, that can pick and choose which cells are right and then destroy the bad ones. Now the problem is they're coming up with a patent for it, which means it'll be bought out and we'll never see it.
Right.
Well, the lay people won't see it. Anybody with an insurance plan will never see it. Those that can pay cash to have this done will be able to get it.
Yep. It's just another way to keep the elite rich on top.
Right. So, but just like with the gorilla, the gorilla man mating bullshit that they tried to do, and just like with the dogs, we've created abominations, and there's has to be a way of saying, you know what, enough is enough. Mm-hmm. That just because we can doesn't mean we should.
Right.
Right now, they're in the process of mapping the entire brain and how it actually works. And so what they want to be able to do is be able to upload. This is what their whole goal is to be able to upload your entire consciousness to a cloud. Then be able to download your consciousness back into a body. So there was I just thought of this right now. There was a Netflix series that came out that was all about this.
I read the book. Something adapt.
Altered state, altered reality, altered something.
Altered carbon.
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
Because I read the book. The author is a brilliant author. Richard. His last name sounds Japanese. I can't remember.
But it's a really interesting idea. But it's just because we can, should we?
Right. I mean, let me ask you this. Would you want your consciousness to live forever?
Yes.
So you wouldn't mind doing that?
I wouldn't mind. No, not at all.
For me, I don't think I would because you're going to basically, after so long, distance from all the people that you care about and love. And I get tired of all the drama and shit that goes on in the world. I don't think I would. I think it would just be too much for me. I'd be like, you know what? I'm done. When I'm done, I'm done. Don't bring me back.
So there was a great article I read a long time ago about the top. It was like the top 6 things that would be horrible about living forever. Mm-hmm. And a couple of them were interesting. Where one, with that much time, you're going to end up in a space that you can't get out of.
Right.
Like 127 hours type of thing.
Yeah.
You will end up in a space like that given enough time. You'll fall down an elevator shaft. you know, you'll break an ankle, end up in an alleyway by yourself, end up out in the desert by yourself. Sometime you're going to end up alone there. The other one was everybody around you will evolve, but you won't.
Oh, yeah.
And so you'll end up looking like a Geico caveman in today's world. So you'll have, maybe by then it will evolve back into protruding foreheads, and you won't have one without a prosthetic.
Well, I mean, if it's just your consciousness, like altered carbon, and they're just putting it into different bodies, your body will evolve.
See, that's the only way that I'd be able to do it, is if I could, still blend in.
Right.
Like the Highlander, if they lived forever, he's, Lambert's not going to look the same in 1,000 years as everybody else.
No. All right, back on topic.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, like, I want to go back to like embryos, and I mentioned earlier about how, our human embryos have gill slits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you also have to go back to the embryos. In the embryonic state, when they're born and stuff, we call them the coccyx, but humans in their embryos have tails that become fully developed at 6 months old inside. But then the body evolves to cover it up, and we know it as our coccyx bone or whatever, however you want to pronounce it.
Mm-hmm.
But so we have tails.
Yeah.
I mean, some people have protruding tails.
Right. There's been multiple cases of that throughout the years where people have, not prehensile tails, but they have
like an overdeveloped coccyx. Basically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have to, have your religion. I'm not against you having a religion, but have an open mind, and as the only thing that's not evolving is religion.
Yeah.
Because they want to stick to these strict dogmas that don't fit in modern society anymore.
I will say this about, though, at the forefront of a lot of this mapping of the brain and this, it's called transhumanism. At the forefront of transhumanism actually is the Mormon Church. Because if you don't know anything about Mormonism, it started off as a cult. John Smith was actually a con man, and I say that because he was arrested for being a con man. That makes you a con man. Mormons don't come after me about that. What I'm saying is he was arrested in Missouri for being a con man. He spent time in prison, then went to Utah, created the Mormon Church, and then
basically because he wanted to have multiple wives.
Yes. But what they're doing right now is they're at the forefront of this because part of their religion is they are actually going to go to another planet. Kind of like Scientology. But Scientology is I don't want to go into it.
No.
It's all, you're going to go to another planet, but you don't believe in aliens. What the fuck ever. But I believe in aliens, but I don't think that God's going to take me to another planet, but I'm the crazy one. But the Mormon Church, and I don't even know if it's the actual church, it's just a bunch of Mormons are at the forefront of pushing this transhumanism idea where you can jack yourself into another conscious or into another body. So I will say that they, or at least a faction of the Mormons, are being very progressive about the use of this technology.
Okay.
But you're right. The rest of religions are not very
right, and it's like it's the hypocrisy of it that gets me, because they don't believe in evolution and they poo-poo science, but yet they use computers, they use smartphones, they use everything that science has created.
Yeah.
If you're gonna be like that, be like the fucking Amish.
Exactly. Or you know what? There are plenty of Muslims that live in small villages in the Middle East that are content living the way that they do. You know, they have their little farms, they have their little communities, they don't bother anybody, they do their own thing. You know, that's cool. That's you.
Yeah, there's areas of Africa like that too with tribes,
Yes.
and areas of Australia with the Aborigines, and
In the Sentinels up in North Sentinel Island, you know, and that
yeah,
some dipshit shows up there with a Bible and holds it up their head, and a kid shoots it with a fucking bow. I love that story. Then
yeah.
he
But I
comes
mean,
back and ends up dead. But
it's just it's complete arrogance and ignorance to think that your theories and your religion and all this is better than anybody else. Because, I'm not a religious person, but if somebody can show me stuff that's going to persuade me, I'm going to be open-minded about it.
yeah, I'm not a religious person either, but I understand faith.
Right.
Because I have faith in scientists to create and explain and figure out stuff that I have no idea how to do. I have faith in their abilities, where people have faith in a higher being. You know, I get faith. I understand faith.
Right.
But yeah, what I want to see from these people is, why don't you evolve into a being that is open-minded?
Right.
To see about how that if you say evolution and Darwin was a crackpot, but you go get a flu vaccination every fucking fall, then you believe in evolution.
Right.
If you think that your kids are the same as you, then your kids are not the same as you. If you ever once called your kid a dumb shit, then you believe in evolution. Because you personally don't believe yourself as a dumb shit, but your son or your daughter is different from you. Oh, they evolved from you into a dumb shit.
Right. I mean,
look at straight to the path of idiocracy.
I mean, our kids have traits from both the mother and father. Unfortunately, some of my kids developed the trait of no common sense that they got from their mother. But that's neither here nor there. But, you can see it. You can see it when you look at your kid. You can see it in their behavior. Yeah, okay, they picked that up from me. That's cool. Oh, they picked that up from their mom. That's cool too. But then there's stuff that, hey, where the fuck did that come from? And that comes from other people that, it's like we talked about before, where you pass on things.
Right.
People that you're in direct contact with. That microevolution or whatever you want to call it, or natural selection, it's just part of life.
Exactly. If evolution didn't happen, we wouldn't have smartphones. We wouldn't have homes with architectural shingles. We wouldn't have solar power. We wouldn't have cars. We wouldn't even have the wheel. We wouldn't have fire. We'd still live in fucking caves. And you know what? We'd still be hairy motherfuckers with big ass bushes that you have to hack through just to find any kind of fun. And I'm sorry, I don't want a hairy woman. No. So we evolved past that. Yes. That's some kind of strange fucking fetish porn that I don't even want to think about.
Right up there with tentacle porn, I believe. It's the whole Cthulhu mythos.
Yeah. Exactly. So really, I do believe that Darwin and there's a whole slew of the other ones that they're escaping me right now. I got them in my notes here somewhere. Like there's Wallace and Mathis and Darwin. They were all at the forefront of our species evolving from something.
Right.
Do I think they were wrong? No. Do I think they had all the information? That obviously they didn't, because we know more about it than we do. We know more about it in the last 140 or 160 years than we did then.
Right.
You know, we know more about warfare today than we did 160 years ago. You know, we know more about economics. We know more about, you know, everything. So to say a scientist that lived 160 years ago was a crackpot is just, it's just bullshit.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like everything else. It's everything evolves with technology. Our research evolves with technology. We wouldn't be able to do this podcast without evolution.
Exactly. And we would not be able to do this podcast without the fine listeners like you.
Right. And we have that one loyal listener. Let's give a shout out to you right now, Jason.
That is Danny Swain from Battleground, Washington. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, Danny. We appreciate the listening. So does that about sum up our whole evolution thing, or do you have more?
No, that pretty much sums it up. I think we ranted a lot about religion, which we tend to do on this show. So
yeah, I was trying to stay away from it, but I really couldn't.
No, I felt that they went hand in hand today. That's why I started with the religious kind of point of view, to kind of throw out what the point, what most of their point really is. I wanted to hone that in.
Right.
And it also opened the discussion.
Right. Well, and you know, I lost my train of thought. So, this is actually one of our shorter podcasts too.
Yeah.
So basically, we talked about the theory of evolution. We talked about the other side of it, the religious side of it, which, you know, the anti-evolutionists. We talked about natural selection. We talked about different types of evolution. We gave examples. Anything else?
Evolve.
Evolve, yes. Open your mind. You know,
keep evolving.
Open your mind to anything is possible in this world. You know, don't just lock yourself in to, you know, this mental state where it's like, I'm right, everybody else is wrong. Open yourself to the possibility that you could be wrong, and by being wrong, you can actually learn from that and become a better person.
And not everything in life is black and white.
No.
You know, one of the first, and you know this more than I do, one of the first things most art instructors do is when they make you, like, especially they did this to my roommate in college. When you buy this, they make you buy this huge pencil or colored pencil set or marker set. And then the first thing he did was he told them to pull out the white marker, pull out the black marker, and throw them in the trash.
Yep.
Because not everything, there's a very few things in life that are completely black and white. And
right.
Look at that in all aspects of your life, especially like in politics. If you are making your judgment based on one single issue, you're missing the bigger picture. There's so much more going on. If your whole thing is about whether or not this person does or does not like abortion, if your whole thing is based on does this person like immigration or not like immigration, you're missing the bigger picture. Because you, as it's our nature to disagree with people. You can't like everything that somebody says.
Right.
I don't like everything Craig says. He doesn't like everything I say. But what we have to do is we have to find a check and balance between all the other shit. This one person that may be pro-abortion could be the best fucking thing that happened to our country, for our economy, for our future, for our children, for education, for everything else. But you won't vote for them because they have one little difference in beliefs. So that is a you problem. And that is why we are, you know, we're doomed as a society, because we pick and choose one fucking issue.
Right. Yeah.
So there, we went religion, I threw in politics.
Well, and to carry on with that, you know, it's real easy too to find out what these people are about. If they're in Congress or something else, you can look at their voting records on what they voted yes for, what they voted no for. You know, you can look and see, okay, all these pro-life people are voting against helping veterans.
Yeah.
So how is that pro-life?
Exactly.
Because you're basically dooming a section of society that has served your country.
Right. You're making sure that these babies are born, but then you don't take care of them.
Right.
You know, maybe pro-life, but entitlement benefits, like welfare benefits.
I call it pro-birth. I don't call it pro-life.
Yeah.
Because you want the kid born, but you don't give a shit about it afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So
it's just hypocrisy. So yeah, anyways.
Exactly. We can go on another whole podcast just about hypocrisy in politics. That's like a couple months worth of
Yeah.
And that's just us going for a straight couple months, no pauses.
Yeah, and that's not even doing research. All right, so we summed it up. That's evolution. I'm sure and as like every other subject, we're merely scratching the surface of it. But it's to get you to go out and look for those. If you have questions, go Google it. Find out the answers.
We're just there to tickle your palate.
Right. So, that being said, this has been the Bunny Rabbit's Hole. Love you guys. Peace out. I am Craig.
I am Jason. Insert tagline here. Have a good one.